Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtotarashata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 2, text number 26. Oho me paramam kashtam abhud avijitatmanaha yena viplavitam brahma vrishalyam jayatatmana. Aho me paramam kashtam abhud avijitatmanaha yena viplavitam brahma vrishalyam jayatatmana. Aho me paramam kashtam abhud avijitatmanaha yena viplavitam brahma vrishalyam jayatatmana. Aho me paramam kashtam abhud avijitatmanaha yena viplavitam brahma vrishalyam jayatatmana. Aho me paramam kashtam Anybody else? On Zoom? Okay. Aho, alas, me, my, paramam, extreme, kashtam, miserable condition, abhut, became, abhijata atmanaha, because my senses were uncontrolled. Yena, by which. Viplavitam, destroyed. Brahma, all my Brahminical qualifications. Vrishalyam, through a Shudrani, a maidservant. Jayata, being born. Atmana, by me. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Ajamila said, "Alas, being a servant of my senses, how degraded I became! I fell down from my position as a duly qualified brahmana and begot children in the womb of a prostitute." Purport. The men of the higher classes, the brahmanas, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, do not beget children in the wombs of lower class women. Therefore, the custom in Vedic society is to examine the horoscopes of a girl and boy being considered for marriage to see whether their combination is suitable. Vedic astrology reveals whether one has been born in the Vipra Varna, Kshatriya Varna, Vaishya Varna, or Shudra Varna, according to the three qualities of material nature. This must be examined because a marriage between a boy of the Vipra Varna and a girl of the Shudra Varna is incompatible. Married life would be miserable for both the husband and wife. Consequently, a boy should marry a girl of the same category. Of course, this is Trigurnya, a material calculation according to the Vedas. But if the boy and girl are devotees, there need be no such considerations. A devotee is transcendental, and therefore, in a marriage between devotees, the boy and girl form a very happy combination. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Shreshtam Manamapi Shachiputramatra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupurim Mathurim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The translation again. Excuse me, I'll read the translation again. Ajamila said, "Alas, being a servant of my senses, how degraded I became. I fell down from my position as a duly qualified brahmana and begot children in the womb of a prostitute." So we're hearing here, after the debate of the Vishnu Dutas and the Yama Dutas, who should take the soul of Ajamil. So Ajamil's now come back to consciousness, you could say. And having seen this conversation going on, it kind of dawns on him that, wow, I was really, really seriously sinful. You could say he comes to his senses. So this is typical of materialists, that you engage in all kinds of material activity. Is it too loud? Oh, okay. This is pretty typical of materialists, that you engage in all kinds of activity, like we see, especially here in Pacific Beach. All these people, they go out, they're drinking and they're doing all kinds of nonsense, and it's like a cliche. You wake up in the morning, you're like, oh man, what did I do last night? And your head hurts, and you got a bunch of texts on your phone saying, hey, why'd you say that to me? You don't remember what you said. And materialists are always lamenting. The nature of material sense gratification is that it causes lamentation, and it's a cycle. It's hankering and lamenting. You hanker for material sense gratification, then you engage in material sense gratification, you perform some kind of vikarma, some kind of whatever, and then you lament. You're thinking, oh, why did I do that? Or it just wasn't satisfying. Oh man, I went through all this work and it really didn't amount to anything. So this is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, Krodhad bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti brahmshad buddhinashro, buddhinashat pranashyati. That this material sense gratification, this lust, causes anger. Lust for material sense gratification, when it's frustrated, causes anger. This anger then develops into moha, Samoha, you become completely bewildered. You just go crazy. And so this verse is describing the descent from Rajoguna into Tamoguna. So Krodad Bhavati Samoha, Samohat Smriti Vibhramaha. Then because one is bewildered, their memory goes away. And they forget what's right and wrong. They forget, who they are, And Buddhi Nashat Pranashati. Then their intelligence goes. And when their intelligence is gone, then back in the material pool. So a basic understanding of the Vedic literatures is that unrestricted material sense gratification is evil, is not worth being performed. It only causes the degradation of society, the degradation of the self, and it doesn't do anything for us, really. And so a basic distinction is made between Shreyas and Preyas. Preyas being immediate benefit, meaning I do things and I get some immediate result. I eat this, whatever, chicken burger or whatever people are eating out there. And I feel some pleasure, I feel some happiness. Whereas Shreyas describes one's ultimate benefit. Shreyas is one's ultimate benefit. And so one who is basically cultured, one who is basically intelligent, will say, okay, I can work, I can do something right now and get some immediate temporary benefit, but I should do something for my long-term benefit. This is the understanding of one who is just basically intelligent. And so the Vedas, they give different methods for obtaining different kinds of, and we're still talking about, kind of karma kanda kind of stuff, kind of material sense gratification. So the Vedas say, okay, here's different methods for engaging in material sense gratification. You do this puja, you do this karma, you worship this demigod, you do this yajna, you worship this demigod, and you can obtain a position in the heavenly planets, or in this life you can get great wealth. You can secure a position on Pitraloka for your forefathers, and you can secure a position for yourself there if you have sufficient intelligent progeny. They'll do different yajnas and you'll be able to enjoy. And so the basic principle of Vedic society, and again we're still talking about the material aspect, is yajna. And so for yajna, what do you need? You need grains, you need ghee, you need priests, you need brahmanas who know science. You need funding, usually from kings or from rich people, administrative people. And these things, these paraphernalia for yajna, they don't just appear on their own. They need to be produced. In the case of grains and ghee, they need to be produced. Similarly, brahmanas, priests, they need to be trained. They need to be, certain people need to be designated to perform these activities. And so this is the purpose of Varnashram Dharma. Krishna says, Chaturvarnyo mayasrasham gunakarma vibhagashaha tasya kartaram apimam vidya kartaram avyayam. The main relevant part is Chaturvarnyo mayasrasham gunakarma vibhagashaha. So who will produce these things? Who will engage in the activities necessary to facilitate yajna? Krishna says, Chaturvarnyo mayasrasham gunakarma vibhagashaha. That according to one's guna, one's karma, according to the work one engages in and according to their nature, their particular modes of nature, they get different, there's Chaturvarnyam, there's 4 divisions of human society. There's Shudras, the working class, who serve the higher 3. There's Vaishyas, who engage in cow protection, who produce grains, the mercantile class. There's Kshatriyas, who are the administrative class, who oversee everything, who arrange things. And then there's Brahmanas, who perform yajna, who advise the rest of society. And so this organization of human society, which ultimately is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is completely perfect. You can logically, and you can just see it's completely perfect. That everybody is meant, or everybody is where they're meant to be, according to their nature and according to their particular proclivities for work. So it's a perfect organization of society to facilitate yajna, to facilitate the ultimate benefit and prosperity of human society, even on a material level. And so we see, because this system now is not in place, and because there's more focus on one's individual prosperity or one's individual material elevation, there's so many people who are doing jobs that they're not meant to do, and thus they're miserable. Not only are they miserable, but they're making other people miserable too. Like the example is given that in Kali Yuga, practically speaking, everybody's a Shudra or worse. And so these Shudra-like people, they're being voted in to positions of leadership by other Shudras, and thus the whole society is being terrorized, practically speaking, by their policies, by their decisions, etc. So if somebody's doing one job, somebody's meant to do one job, and they're meant to do another job, the whole thing falls apart, because it's not properly organized. It's just a basic principle that things should be in their proper place. However, Prabhupada in the purport and in different places in the Vedic literatures, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada describes in this verse, in the purport, that a devotee is transcendental. That all these things, okay, they're material considerations, but the devotees, we're not so interested. We're not so interested in all these material considerations. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Shudra, I'm not a Sannyasi, Vanaprastha, Grahastha, Brahmachari, etc. These are all material designations. We understand. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva dharman pratyajya, very famous verse, Mam ekam sharanam raja, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashyami ma shujaha. That just give up all these different dharmas, give up all these different material dharmas, and just surrender unto me. And I will free you of ma shujaha. I will free you from all sin-free actions. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about anything else. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his conversation with Ramananda Roy, Ramananda Roy was, he spoke to him, or he mentioned Varnashram Dharma. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was trying to, you could say, get out of him the highest benefit, trying to get him to speak, or the highest, topmost thing. And Ramananda Roy, he began with speaking about Varnashram. He said, doing your Varnashram duty, that's the highest thing. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, what did he say? Eho bahya, this is external. And he rejected it. And then he went on. So all these things are mentioned in relation to devotees and Varnashram, that devotees are transcendental, that we don't need it, that it's not required. And while, yes, all of these things are true, all of these things are true, that devotees are transcendental to all these material designations, that devotees don't necessarily require Varnashram Dharma. However, Varnashram Dharma, while it is a material consideration, while it is a material arrangement, it's a very favorable one. It's a very favorable one for the execution of Krishna consciousness. Just like anything in this material world, buildings, cars, phones, clocks, all these things, they're material things. However, they can be very nicely used in the service of Krishna. They can be very useful for serving Krishna. Even this brahmachari ashram we have here. Brahmachari ashram is a material thing. It's a material designation. To say I'm a brahmachari, or this is a material designation. However, it's a very productive one. It's a very productive material designation. And living in the association of brahmacharyas and saying, okay, we're brahmacharyas, we're going to practice brahmacharya. It's a material arrangement, but it's an extremely, as the brahmacharyas can attest, it's an extremely favorable one for executing Krishna consciousness. So like anything, Varnashram is to be used to serve Krishna. And therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and our own A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada promoted so heavily this Daivi Varnashram. Means Varnashram based on this principle, Taf Pumbir Dirasheshtam Varnashram Vibhagashaha Sunushatasya Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. Based on this principle of Haritoshanam, that the perfection, this verse is saying that the perfection of one's execution of their prescribed duties in Varnashram Dharma is the pleasure of Hari, the pleasure of Krishna. And this pleasure of Krishna, or this arrangement of Varnashram, like I mentioned, is a tool to be used to that end. And all the material regulations of Varnashram, meaning, for example, brahmacharis, they follow their particular duties. Grihasthas, they follow their particular duties. Vanaprasthas, they follow their duties. And sannyasis, they follow their duties. All of these things, one should think, Kayena vacha manasendriyarva buddhyatmana vanashuta subhavat kroti yadyat sakalam parasmai narayanayeti samarpayetat. One should go about their day doing the activities prescribed to them according to their svabhav, according to their nature, thinking this is for the pleasure of Narayana. And we think, of course, this is for the pleasure of Krishna. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada wanted this society, this ISKCON society, and the society of devotees in general, to lead the world by establishing Varnashram Dharma. Because while yes, Varnashram is good for devotees, Varnashram is also good for non-devotees. Varnashram is like the ultimate preaching tool. Just think, so many people, they come to the temple, they may, chant, and they may be interested in the philosophy, but they're not necessarily ready to, you could say, surrender all the way. They still have, maybe they have doubts, or maybe they're just not fully convinced of the philosophy. But in Varnashram Dharma, in Srila Prabhupada's vision for Varnashram Dharma, these people have a place. It's not that they have to continue working outside, continue associating with materialists, and then once in a while come to the temple and, that's their devotee association, maybe once a week for an hour or something like that. Excuse me. But actually, in the Varnashram system, there's a place for all these people. There's a place for different, you could say, gradations of surrender. So if one is not fully surrendered, or if one is not fully convinced of the value of devotional service, fine. Let him come, live within Varnashram, the Varnashram system, execute his prescribed duties, and at the same time he'll be associating with devotees, he'll be hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and in this way gradually he'll be purified. So in this way, Varnashram Dharma is the greatest form of bridge preaching. The idea of bridge preaching is, okay, we'll build a bridge, meet people where they're at, and then bring them across the bridge. But this Varnashram Dharma, this establishment of Varnashram Dharma, is the ultimate bridge preaching. It's the original bridge preaching, you could say. That, fine, you don't have to surrender, you don't even have to chant, you don't even have to stop eating meat. Just come, live with us on our, Varnashram community. This is your job, according to your nature. Do this, but come to the temple programs, associate with the devotees, and by this, Nashtaprayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashaloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishaki. That just by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and serving the pure devotees, gradually one's consciousness will be purified. Abhadra, all the inauspicious things within the heart will be cleansed. And devotional service to the Supreme Lord will be established in the heart as an irrevocable fact. And this was Srila Prabhupada's faith. That let me come to the West and just let them. He brought one thing with him. Of course, he brought the holy name. But he brought the Srimad Bhagavatam. Let people hear Srimad Bhagavatam. And by this, their consciousness will be purified. This is Srila Prabhupada's faith. And so, this Krishna consciousness movement is meant to lead people in this way. It's meant to create, Srila Prabhupada wanted to create a class of brahmanas. First and foremost, before we establish everything else, Srila Prabhupada wanted to create a class of brahmanas. Because the brahmanas, they're described as the head of society. It means they're the brain. You can imagine a person, if it's, of course, a person without a brain, they wouldn't be alive. But you can imagine a person with a malfunctioning brain. You see them all the time. I'm talking about, we see like homeless, people around here. Their brains are just practically gone. and they're just walking around and mumbling to themselves and not doing much. And so similarly, this society, the entire human society now, bereft of a class of bona fide brahmanas, is basically like an insane person, just walking around aimlessly, not doing anything really valuable. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada wanted to create this, first and foremost, a class of brahmanas. And I'll read a quote from Srila Prabhupada. He's from a lecture in 1973. He says, "So, this Krishna consciousness movement is creating some brain of the human society, brahmana. And this brain, brahmana's business is, brahmana, this word, very word, comes. So, brahmana means one who knows God. That is brahmana. And keeping in view of God, they teach others to become God conscious. So the human society, if there is no brahmanas who can teach about God, who can elevate persons to God consciousness, then it is also animal society. And then the mission of human life will not be fulfilled." So unless there's a class of people who can teach the population at large about God, about Krishna, then, like Srila Prabhupada says, the mission of human life won't be fulfilled. Therefore, Prabhupada says all the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, not just those who are, as we say, second initiated, should become brahmanas. There's a verse, Janmana jayate shudra, samskarad bhaved dvija, veda patad bhaved vipra, brahmajanatiti brahmanaha. That actually everybody in the society, janmana jayate shudra, that actually everybody's born a shudra. Everybody. Even those born in brahmana families, they're actually born shudras. Why? Because they don't know anything. A baby doesn't know practically anything about anything. They eat and they sleep, and they're kind of like, you could say, like little animals. They don't have refined intelligence. Therefore, they're like Shudras. Everybody who's born is like a Shudra. Samskar bhaved dvija, but one who undergoes the upanayana samskar, they become dvija, twice born. The one who studies the Vedas, they become vipra. But one who is a brahmana, a true brahmana, this verse says, Brahma jana titi brahmanaha. That one who is a true brahmana understands Brahma. Just like this word, brahmanaha, means one who understands Brahma. So it's not just that by wearing a string, Prabhupada says a man wears a thread worth 2 paisa and he calls himself a brahmana. He said this in a Vyas Puja offering to his spiritual master before he came to the West. So it's not just that by wearing a 2 paisa thread that one becomes a brahmana, but actually the qualification of a brahmana is that he understands Brahma. And so like this, anybody who is a member of the Krishna consciousness movement can become a brahmana. And Srila Prabhupada says that we should understand God and ourselves become ideal people, develop the qualities of a brahmana, because by becoming ideal ourselves, we can make others ideal. And so the whole goal of Varnashram, the whole goal of this Krishna consciousness movement in general, is to create an ideal situation in the world so that everybody, not just us, not just that we're like a select group and all right, we heard about Krishna, but you guys are all losers and you guys don't get to hear about Krishna, and we just, sit around in our temples and eat, sleep, and chant some rounds. But the idea is that we're trying to create a revolution in society at large, a revolution within ourselves, and then in turn a revolution in society at large, so that everybody, all the fallen conditioned souls, can go back home, back to Godhead. And so this Varnashram system and all the rules and regulations which might seem material, which might seem external or not for Vaishnavas, actually they're extremely important. They're extremely important for us to follow so that we can impart them unto others, to create a favorable situation so that we can all go back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, while Varnashram is a material consideration, we shouldn't discard it thinking of the external. We shouldn't be, you could say, too transcendental in this regard. But we should have the intelligence to understand what can and should be used in the service of Krishna. I guess it's a little early, but we can open up to questions. That's all I really have. If there's any questions.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Wonderful talk. I like the point about the purpose of Varnashram Dharma is to serve the Lord and progress in spiritual life. So my question is, in today's world, I mean, we rarely see like Varnashram Dharma. So what are some steps you think, we as a community can take, like one step which can be favorable towards the direction which Srila Prabhupada has pointed out?
Well, I mean, there are many things already being done. Of course, on the institutional level, there's many devotees working on it, many devotees promoting it, promoting Varnashram Dharma. Are you talking about like steps like on a societal level or like on an individual level? Steps that one can take toward any level. Yeah, well, I guess on an individual level, one can, understand, the duties of their particular varna, the duties of their ashram, and very strictly execute them. Like, for example, brahmacharis. Brahmacharis are meant to be very, strictly celibate, and keeping association with women to a minimum. Even Shastra says, technically speaking, that brahmachari, I mean, of course, this is not necessarily practical today, of course, with preaching and everything like that. But traditionally, brahmacharis actually don't even see women because they live in the forest and, serving the spiritual master. Like there's the example, Rishi Shringa. He was, a brahmachari, and he didn't even know what a woman. He didn't even know women existed. And then, and anyway, it's a whole story. But and similarly for grihastas, following the duties of the grihastha ashram, sannyasis following the duties of the sannyasa ashram, means preaching, etc. Vanaprasthas, living, engaging in austerity, moving toward more and more renunciation. So, like this, one should understand the duties of their varna, the duties of their ashram, and then also for brahmanas, engaging in, worshiping the deity, or engaging in preaching, especially for brahmanas, studying the Vedas, becoming very learned in Shastra, the duties of a brahmana, and then also, like I said, teaching others. So one should be, first and foremost, know the duties of their varna and ashram, and then execute them, like I said, very strictly, on an individual level. On an institutional or societal level, there's so many things which could be done, which devotees are doing. Of course, establishing, Prabhupada wanted farms to be established, and then devotees to go and live on those farms very simply, and just basically living like Krishna did. Not necessarily of course, ideally, you could say no electricity, or everything very self-sufficient. Everything is contained within the community, and then, of course, delineating who is a brahmana, who is a kshatriya, vaishya, shudra, etc. Then engaging those people in their particular duties. And anyway, there's so many things. That was Srila Prabhupada's vision. And then, of course, mainly protecting cows. That's a huge, huge aspect of Varnashram. So all these things. And then Prabhupada wanted devotees to lead by example. And then when people see, because it's practically speaking, it's a given. And we're already seeing that this society, the material civilization, is failing already. Actually, it's already failed. Because it's falling apart. So the idea is that people will more and more kind of wake up to this. And if the devotees have are living in such a way that they're presenting a viable alternative, people will see that. And Prabhupada said people will flock to our farms by the millions. So that's the idea.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could maybe talk about the influence of this movement and Srila Prabhupada in the modern society. Because, what we can see is that this society is actually, for the most part, rejecting the Varnashram Dharma and not following it. But maybe if you can speak about how this helped to change the world.
Well, Varnashram Dharma is a work in progress. It's not, we haven't really established Varnashram Dharma yet. Yeah. So, he said you have to have the city. So, we haven't really established Varnashram Dharma yet. So I guess we can't really see the effect of Varnashram Dharma on this society yet, just because it hasn't really been implemented. But in terms of the effect that the Krishna consciousness movement has had on society in general, I mean, there's different things we can see. I mean, one thing is that there's many people who are, very spiritual, like Dharmaseta Prabhu was saying yesterday, spiritual but not religious. But people are becoming more aware of certain things, more aware of, just the words Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra, would not have been known, practically speaking, by anyone. If it weren't for ISKCON, if it weren't for the Krishna consciousness movement. Also, especially in India, the Krishna consciousness movement, the Gaudiya Sampradaya, particularly ISKCON, has a huge influence on other Sampradayas even, and on, you could say, Hindu society in general. So there are things which are being seen, subtle things. Also the rise in vegetarianism as a very prominent thing is also arguably due to the Krishna consciousness movement. So all these things can be seen as effects of the Krishna consciousness movement. But it's the duty of preachers to not only go out and give people books and give people the holy name, but also to see that they're trained. Not just that we give people a book and we say, okay, that's my preaching, I did it, I preached. And by hook or by crook, we just give somebody a book and we can just say whatever the hell we want. As long as they take the book, we've preached. But the idea is that we should try to convince people of Krishna consciousness. That people get books and then they come to the temple and we actually speak with them and we actually try to induce them to go deeper. And then when people are going deeper, we speak to them and we preach to them and we induce them to go even deeper. And then if people, for example, join the ashram, then we train them. And even the people who don't join the ashram, then we train them in the principles of spiritual life and the principles of Vedic culture. It's extremely important. Not just that, by giving people books in and of itself, that's not the whole picture. Giving people a book is just the beginning. We give people a book, but then the effect of that book is that, okay, they'll come to the temple and they'll start chanting, they'll be convinced of the philosophy, they'll develop more and more of an understanding. But we have to kindle that. We have to, I think it's Vaisheshika Guru who says, we have to fan the spark. So if we just light the fire, but we don't fan it, then it'll just go out. And then the whole thing is kind of, doesn't really have any effect. So, yes, in relation to your question, we can preach like crazy in terms of giving people books, and but if we don't actually properly train them or give them the proper understanding by which they can continue to go deeper, then we won't have an effect. And of course, like you said, there's many people who will just outright reject Krishna consciousness, who just aren't ready for it. That's fine. What can we do? We can't force people. Krishna won't get in the way of people's free will. But that's there. So sorry, is that a
That's good.
satisfying answer?
I just thought of another question.
Yeah.
If that's okay. How is a devotee transcendental to Varnashram Dharma if a particular inclination out of nature is still there in a devotee, like even living in a brahmachari ashram, for instance?
Right. So a devotee, when I say that devotees are transcendental, when Prabhupada says that devotees are transcendental, really he's speaking about pure devotees. Because when one is still even somewhat materially contaminated, they have different particular inclinations, and even pure devotees, there's different inclinations in relation to serving Krishna. Excuse me. But as long as one is materially contaminated, even a little bit, they'll always have a particular inclination or a particular way which they work best with the material energy in order to facilitate their Krishna consciousness. Like, for example, some people, if they get married, it'll just be a disaster. Or they just don't have a desire, or they just don't really want to get married. Therefore, the brahmachari ashram. Brahmachari ashram is meant for two purposes. Traditionally, actually, it's meant for people to, like Prabhupada says, good brahmachari makes a good grihastha. Now, you don't have to get married if you're a brahmachari. There are some people who definitely will stay brahmachari and never get married. But yeah, people, they have their different inclinations, different ways that they work with the material energy that facilitate their Krishna consciousness based on their different modes of material nature, based on their karma, based on all these things. So Varnashram basically says, okay, let's take advantage of that. Let's find that situation and kind of engage you in it. But really, devotees are transcendental to it. We're transcendental from any material designations. And in fact, the holy name alone is sufficient to deliver us. We don't need Varnashram to deliver us. The holy name alone is sufficient to deliver us. But Varnashram creates a nice atmosphere. And the regulations which are prescribed for Varnashram, for example, anyway, so many things. They create a nice atmosphere, which makes it very easy to be Krishna conscious. Like Prabhupada says, mentions in one place regarding Varnashram, that without being peaceful, what's the question of developing Krishna consciousness? If your mind is always agitated, what's the question of advancing in Krishna consciousness? So Varnashram creates a peaceful situation, where one's mind is peaceful, and they can, more favorably engage in Krishna consciousness.
Because when you join the ashram, you're not really participating in the Varnashram society, so you're pulled into the ashram without that experience. So
What do you mean?
If you are trained in the Varnashram society, and if you join the ashram, for instance, the brahmachari ashram, it's a completely different experience because you'd be trained up and ready for it. But as devotees,
well, the brahmachari ashram is the first ashram. The brahmachari ashram is the training. Because traditionally brahmacharis, basically you're brahmachari from age 5 until age 25. So the brahmachari ashram is the training.
Are you talking about joining it at like 25?
Yeah, I'm talking about the modern,
right.
situation.
But in the same way, well, yes, it could be kind of difficult, or it could be kind of, you could say disharmonious. It's natural, but the purpose of the brahmachari ashram is to train one in order to come to that platform where it becomes natural. So, while in the beginning it can be kind of difficult, or it can be difficult even to get to the point of joining, if we can at least imbibe in people sufficient faith that, okay, at least this is a good thing to try, or at least maybe I'm not ready now, or I can't particularly, I can't really understand now, at least they can have the faith that, okay, if I join and if I try this out, then I'll receive training and I'll be able to understand more and go deeper. And it'll become more clear to me. Is that a okay answer? Okay. Bhakti Saul.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I just want to see if you could expound on the point of so Varnashram duty. Varnashram is based on duties, and we're kind of doing things out of dutiful things. And I was kind of thinking about the verse in the Gita when Krishna says that first when you do certain things it tastes like poison, but at the end it tastes like nectar, but vice versa. So I was wondering, how do we experience that in Varnashram Dharma, in the sense of we perform these duties, and sometimes it can be kind of tough, and how important austerity is,
Well, Varnashram is the safety net, basically, that protects one from complete fall down. So the idea is that, okay, even if you're doing it, even if you don't want to engage in your prescribed duties, you think, okay, I have to do this. This is my duty. I have to do this. And so you do it, and then gradually you become purified. So Vedic culture, Vedic society, is based on the principle, like I said, of Shreyas. It's based on the principle of one's ultimate benefit or a long-term benefit rather than just receiving like little, spurts of pleasure. And it's also based on the principle of selflessness, that, okay, if I don't do my duty, then this person can't do their duty, and then this person, and the whole thing, it's a system. Everything is connected and interrelated. So one should have that understanding, and then with that understanding, say, okay, although I don't want to do this right now, let me do my duty, because that's the right thing to do, and like this, they'll become gradually purified, and then, like you said, it's poison in the beginning, you don't want to do it, but it becomes nectar in the end. And this is kind of a material example. Really, what Krishna's talking about is sadhana, that engaging the process of sadhana, it's difficult, and maybe, like, for example, if you don't want to chant, it's difficult to chant. But gradually, as you chant, you become purified, and then you want to chant. Then it becomes like nectar. So in a similar way, for one's, you could say, material duties in Varnashram Dharma, the thing keeping the whole thing together is this idea of duty. And so in Varnashram society, people are trained from the beginning of their lives in selfless service and in duty. That's the purpose of the brahmacharya ashram for children. And then, of course, we can imbibe that as well as, you could say older brahmacharis. Is that okay? Okay. Joseph, you had something?
You mentioned surrendering, that it can be done slowly, or there's different levels of surrender. I like to hear that. I was taught other religions, you have to surrender completely. And then your bridge preaching, that's really interesting. I've always been preached to all my life. I didn't like it. But I can tell the way I've been treated, it's, there's a process involved. So where on the bridge am I?
So, there's different gradations of surrender. Not that by only surrendering a little bit, you can get the whole thing, though. The idea is that, you do ultimately have to completely, if you want to go back home, back to Godhead, if you want to be with Krishna, you have to completely surrender. It's not that, okay, there's different gradations of surrender, so I picked this one. And, and all paths lead to the same place, and I'll just surrender a little bit. And then, Krishna's very merciful. He'll, No, one should work toward complete surrender. But the point is that everybody is where they're at. There are some people who are ready, who are saying, all right now I'm going to completely surrender. But there are other people who aren't. And so for those other people who aren't ready to fully surrender, Varnashram, this system of the 4 divisions of human society, it gives them a place. It says, okay, you can't completely surrender, at least just stay in the spot, and do your duty, and this way you'll be prevented from just completely falling back into the material pool. And then this idea of bridge preaching, the bridge is an analogy. The idea that, okay, other people are here, the devotees are here, therefore we have to build a bridge, make Krishna consciousness relatable to them in different ways. And like this, they'll get on the bridge, and then they'll cross the bridge. And then eventually they'll come to Krishna consciousness. Of course, devotees have different opinions about this. But the comparison I was making is that Varnashram Dharma is like that bridge. It's okay, let's meet people where they're at. And then by doing their prescribed duties, by engaging in their duties within Varnashram Dharma, and at the same time associating with devotees and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, they'll make more progress further along the bridge, and eventually they'll come to the platform of devotional service. Hare Krishna. Anything on Zoom? Or anything else in here?
Yes,
Okay, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
yes, Amogha Prabhu, thank you very much. You're very kind. Dandavat Pranams Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
The text you chose for today, 6 to Srimad Bhagavatam 6:26, deals with Ajamila becoming, because he became a servant of his senses, then all his Brahminical qualifications disappeared. He lost them. So based on this, my question is, why is it that if I become a Godasa, servant of the senses, I dare to ask, I become no better than stupid. Stupid in the lack of in the sense of lack of intelligence, and
Yeah.
in this case, Brahminical intelligence.
Right. Well, one who engages in material sense gratification does become stupid. There's a few different verses. I'm trying to pick one that I could. Well, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, like I quoted earlier, well, I quoted the second verse, but he says, Dhyayato vishyam pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodha bijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramaha smriti brahmshat buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. So actually Krishna is saying that one who engages in sense gratification becomes stupid. Because by contemplating the objects of the senses, one associates with them. Then when one associates with them, sangasteshu vajayate, sangat sanjayate kama, then one becomes lusty. It's like this idea of thinking, feeling, and willing. So then one desires to bring the sense objects in contact with the senses. And then from there, their lust is frustrated. Because lust, Krishna also says, it burns like fire and can never be satiated. It's very, very intense. But no matter how much stuff you stuff into your senses, this fire will never be extinguished. This desire will never be quenched. And so then people just become frustrated. And from this frustration, people become bewildered. They're thinking, they just become crazy. Then from this bewilderment, like I said, they lose their memory, they forget what's right and wrong, they forget who they are, they forget what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do, and then their intelligence is gone, their discrimination, what to engage in, what not to engage in, and then from this, they're cast back down into the material pool. They just fall down into the mode of ignorance. And so, Prahlad Maharaj also says, Matirna Krishna Parata Svatova Mito Vipadyeta Grihavratanam Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamisram Punaf Punah Sharvata Charvananam. That one who engages in material sense gratification, it never dawns on them that it's the source of their misery. And because their senses are uncontrolled, because like you said, they're godas, they enter into this crazy mentality of chewing the chewed, of chewing that which has already been chewed. They're engaging in all this work in order to enjoy something, but it doesn't bring them pleasure. It didn't bring them pleasure before. It's not bringing them pleasure now. And so from that, one who's intelligent can logically understand, okay, this won't bring me pleasure in the future. But people who are bewildered, their consciousness is taken away by this lust for material sense gratification. And so therefore, it never comes to mind. Matirna Krishna Paratasvatova, it never comes to mind. Even if somebody comes up to them and is telling them, hey, just, look at what you're doing. Even if somebody explains it to them, it never comes to mind that maybe I should try to think of doing something else. So in this way, they become stupid. Like you said, one who is godas, they're stupid. And the qualification of a brahmana is that he's intelligent and his senses are controlled. And he's sober, he's dhira. And so therefore he can understand what is valuable, what is not valuable. He can see what's what. So one who doesn't have this qualification of sobriety, one who doesn't have the discrimination to see what's valuable and what's not valuable, how can they be called a brahmana? And so therefore Ajamila lost his Brahminical qualification because he lost this discrimination, what is to be done and what is not to be done. Is that a satisfying answer?
Yes, and if you allow me, I just have a very quick follow-up question.
Okay.
If the recommendation is for us to not invest on chewing the chewed, if not chewing the chewed, what is the exact opposite of chewing the chewed? In the context of my question and your wonderful answer. If not chewing the chewed, doing what instead?
Spitting it out. Yeah. And yeah, chewing prasadam, yeah. Yeah, the opposite.
Yes, that is the answer, chewing prasadam.
Yeah, that's the answer. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the idea is that one should, if one is chewing the chewed, then one should just give it up upon realizing that it's a nonsense thing to do. Okay, so anyway.
Yes, but replacing it with chewing
Exactly,
prasadam
yeah,
and
yeah.
anything else?
Use the tongue for chanting Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Of course, Hare Krishna, of course.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Krishna Kripa Srimurti Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.